All right, Kevin, we are here for part four of this excellent series, and in my opinion, that's just a biased opinion. But last time we were talking, you made a great point when I asked you, or you made a statement when I asked you what was going through your mind in Iraq 2005 with a lot of this combat, and you mentioned that at that point you had lost a big chunk of your religion. And us being from the South, religion is everywhere down here.
Yeah.
Churches everywhere, billboards everywhere. So, kind of take me through some of this if you feel comfortable. What happened with your faith, by this point in 2005? I know you mentioned Haiti, but take me through it.
Oh man, that is pretty heavy. I didn't expect that. So I uh I was raised a Southern Baptist. I went to River Road Baptist Church, and then I went to Siloam Baptist Church for a little bit, but then I ended up at Mount Airy Baptist Church in the upstate of South Carolina. And at first, when I went to River Road, I was a little kid. I went with my mom and my dad and my brother. We went every Sunday. And then they said they stopped going because it was too political. I don't remember about when it stopped. I think it was probably it was before I was 5. Man, maybe I was about six. I remember waking up on Sundays and watching cartoons and then going to Sunday school and then, going to church. Anyway, I was all about it. I loved Jesus. I loved going to church. I loved singing and praising, and I love the whole 9 yards. To this day, I still love Jesus. I think Jesus was a pretty squared away dude. You know what I mean? But after my parents stopped going, I kind of went by myself whenever I could. I had friends that would go, and I'd ask if they could pick me up and take me with them. And that's when I went to Siloam Baptist Church. It's right up the street from where I grew up. And it was one of the bigger churches. None of these were mega churches. Mega churches weren't really a thing yet at this point. But Siloam, I guess, was what you would call the mega church of our town, in that instead of having, 90 people at its services, it had, like 300 people at its services.
That's
And
big
it's
for a
pretty.
small town.
And it was a big church too, and then they had a big gymnasium and all kind. I mean, they had a lot of money. Anyway, I never really liked the church. I felt like it was too big for me. And a lot of people loved it, and they had a great time worshiping there, but it wasn't for me. Um, I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, you're good, brother.
So after Siloam, I kind of got a steady ride to Mount Airy Baptist Church, and it was a little farther away, but I loved it because it was right in between a tiny little itty bitty church and that Siloam church. It was right in the middle. They had some money, but it wasn't too big. They had a great worship center. The people there were really kind. I remember my youth pastor used to come, and he would pick me up from school like 2 days a week, and he would take me and we'd pick up a cheeseburger and just drive around and talk. I mean, we talked theology, philosophy, we talked all kinds of crazy stuff. I asked any question I could think of because I've never shied away from it. And with that said, I've always had a lot of doubt within religion and organized religion in particular. Jesus himself had a lot to say about organized religion. Uh, and I listened, I've always wondered why I was going to organized religion, and they were preaching Jesus's word, and it never clicked to me that, like, wait, he's saying that all of this is bad. Politics and money and all of this being involved in a church is not the way it's supposed to be. Anyway. Um, I went to Mount Airy for a while by myself. By this time my parents weren't going, my brother wasn't going. They were religious, but they weren't going to church. My dad didn't go to church again until after my mother passed away. He and my mother were getting a divorce actually, and they had been separated for a little bit when my mom was in a car accident. And that's what sparked my dad going back to church. But I mean, honestly, and I don't mean to be cruel here, he kind of went off the deep end with a lot of stuff. He was like he was doing that whole, like, the orbs, orbs and
Yep.
photos, the light, or he was doing all that stuff. I mean,
Oh,
it was weird, and it was just like, yeah, dad, at least church like was like there. I'm glad that it was there for him and it helped him a lot. Anyway, My family didn't go to church. None of my really extended family went to church regularly. It was just me, and I did it religiously. I went every Wednesday. I went to all of the volunteer events that I could. And I think a big part of it was just me trying to escape my household because it wasn't the best. But I also really enjoyed it, and I felt like I was being a good Christian, and it was just a big part of who I was for a very long time. Uh, then I went to military school, and we had church service there. It was like a chaplain would come from a base and just give us this very generic, non-denominational service. And I'm not complaining about it. It was better than nothing. And we all got to put our hands up and feel the power of Jesus. And well, I went to boot camp. I went to church all through boot camp. Had a Bible with me. Um, Went to church while I was in Iwakuni. I actually volunteered for the chaplain a few times. The chaplain always has He's always, I mean, he's like a recruiter. It's kind of sad because he's like a scavenger. Whenever you come in, you have to go through the cycling in Japan. Whenever you go overseas, you have to check in and go through this whole process. And he made sure that visiting the chaplain was part of that process. And he would like entice you with pizza and all kinds of things. He'd be like, there's pizza and soda over here, guys. Like, come on and then we could talk about the word of God. It's great. But I didn't like play along with the pizza thing, but I would go on my own time, and I would always make sure I knew the chaplain. Really odd when I was in Japan, my mother passed away. This is a really personal story. I'll make it quick because I know you don't have a lot of time,
Brother,
but
take your time with personal stuff, man. I
my
make
my
time.
mom passed away. It was Saturday afternoon in South Carolina when she had her car accident, and it was Sunday morning for me in Japan. So I had a telephone, and this was 2003. So I had a telephone, a landline in my barracks room, and you can pay extra for it. And the only reason you could have it is because I had a 56.6 modem. I had my dial-up. You remember that shit? So I had a dial-up modem. Hey, it was better than my old 28.8. And before that, the 14.4, that was so terrible. Anyway,
And
so I had my old dial-up modem in there, and that's why I had a phone. But I had given my number out just in case for emergencies. And I was asleep, just groggy Kevin in the bed, and I heard it ring, and I kind of half awake, half asleep. And I heard it ring, and by the time I kind of opened my eyes and realized what was going on, I jumped out of bed and it stopped ringing. There was no one there. So I got back in bed. I was like, oh, whatever. And it started ringing again. And I knew immediately in my head something's wrong. So I went over to my phone, picked it up, and it was my brother. And as soon as I heard his voice, I was thinking, was it mom or was it dad? He hadn't even said anything other than hey. And he told me it was my mom. So I was in kind of a daze. This was like early as shit Sunday morning, probably 6 a.m. No one's awake. Everyone's hungover. Like, I mean, it was quiet. I'll say that. So, in a daze, I was just like, I need a cigarette. I smoked at the time. And so I went out behind the barracks and I had a cigarette. And that behind my barracks there was a seawall. So the Monzin River comes in from the ocean and the base is right on that river. And there's a big cement wall and you can run on top of that wall. It's like there's plenty of room. It's really wide. And we would exercise up there and everything. Anyway, I went up there and I was sitting on the wall having a cigarette. One, you're not supposed to sit on the edge of the wall. I was doing it anyway. And two, I don't think you were supposed to smoke up there, but fuck it, I needed a cigarette. Anyway, I was watching the sunrise over the river and having my cigarette, and I heard some little feet shuffle, and I turned, and lo and behold, there's the chaplain just shuffling, running over, and he's like, "Oh, hey, McCall, how are you doing today?" And he sat with me for a good hour. I told him what happened, and we had this crazy talk. I mean, he was a lot of help to me, and it's just. As I'm not religious, but the universe is weird like that.
it is.
I don't know, those coincidences, they can be really strong. I've had stronger coincidences than that happen in my life, but it was strange and it was what I needed. I talked to him for a little bit. At the time, I was still really religious. I had deployed. We had gone on a training exercise to Korea, he and I together. So he and I were really close. Like it was fortuitous. It was serendipity, whatever you want to call it. It was perfect in the moment. Anyway, all of that to say, like the chaplain and I were pretty close. And I was still very religious at that time. After my mother passed away, um, I went back to I went back to South Carolina for her funeral. I saw how it affected my family, my dad, my brother, you know. It affected all three of us in completely different ways. It was scary for me. I was really solemn and somber. My brother had just kind of, I don't know if he was like just kind of blocking it out or he was dealing with it in his own way at his own pace, you know. And my dad was just he was destroyed. So it was really messed up. Anyway, I needed to talk to the chaplain when I talked to him. It really kind of put my headspace where it needed to be before I went home and dealt with all that. So back to the original story. After Iwakuni, I went back to Iwakuni. I'd extended to stay for another year, but then my mom passed and I asked to be sent home where I wouldn't deploy, and they sent me to fucking division. But after my mom passed, I started seeing things a lot differently. And then once I got to division, I lost a couple friends almost immediately after getting there. I think I was there for a month before I lost one friend. He was hit by an IED in Iraq, and then I lost another friend in Afghanistan. But it was that's about when my boat was rocked, I guess. That's about when I started really picking at the cracks that had always been there in my life. Like I said earlier, there was always a doubt, and I was always questioning the contradictions, questioning the rules that people had made, the analyses that they come up with of the Word of God, and like their translations. It never made any sense to me. About this time is where I really started to pay attention to those inconsistencies, those holes, those plot holes. Um, the fact that like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who wrote about Jesus's life, lived like 400 to 800 years after Jesus. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that really just rocked me, as I said. That I've always disliked organized religion, and when I say I'm an atheist, I'm not an anti-theist. I'm an atheist. I'm not against any religion whatsoever. I see the necessity. I've been asked by too many good Christians. They say, "Oh, you're an atheist? What keeps you from just going and killing everybody?" And it's like, bitch, what keeps you from going to kill? My conscience and my morals, like, what is the only thing that's keeping you from just killing everybody? The promise of an afterlife? Like, what? So, all of these things, it was an avalanche, man. And then, I went to Haiti. I saw executions every day. I mean, I saw human bodies that were treated as just trash. I'm not saying that they were like desecrating this human. It's that they didn't value this. They just put it in the pile with the trash. It's um going to Iraq, going everywhere that I went, man, and seeing not everywhere, not everywhere is bad. Even some of the bad places have a lot of good things there. But as far as me and religion and I mean theology, philosophy is all balled up into one with me. But it's all set in death and the value of it. It's not the value of life. There's too many people who call themselves pro-life and they're not. They're pro-birth. They don't give a shit about life. They don't care what happens to anybody after they're born. They don't care about feeding kids. They don't care about subsidizing school lunches. They don't care about education. They don't care about having social services or I mean they don't care about anything that happens in life. We do not value life. What we value is death. The lady who came to me and said, "What's keeping you from killing everything?" Death is what keeps her straight. It's not life. It's not a value of it. So the value of death is really what set me in stone. For a lot of people, that value is set by their loved one, their parent, their grandparent passing away, and they have to pay for the funeral. They have to pay for the meal after, and all of the, it costs a shitload to have a person die in your family. I don't know if you've ever been through it. I did it twice. It sucks. It's a lot of money. So, if you do a burial or a cremation or whatever you do, it costs a ton of money regardless. Cremation's cheaper, but if that's how you value death, along with the emotional toll that it puts on you, okay. But if you see it in the sense that I took it without emotion, because it didn't really bother me in the moment, I saw it and I was like, what the fuck, but it's not like I was losing sleep at night over it. In the moment, it it really cemented my idea of the value of death. I didn't know these people. I didn't have emotional investment in these people, other than just being a fellow human being. I really can't say I cared about these people other than, just that I do value life and I value humanity and I am a humanist in so many terms, meanings of the term. Um, I I don't value death very much. I don't think that our lives are that meaningful outside of what we assign them. And that's so short term that it's bullshit. If you don't value death, if there's no value to it, you don't fear it as much. I think everyone naturally fears it and tries to avoid it. But if you're not afraid of it, then it's not this it's not this miraculous miracle. It's not the next step. It's just the end, It's just the end. I don't want it to be anything more. Why should it be? Like I wasted if I died right now, man, I wasted 41 years doing fucking nothing. Why wouldn't the afterlife be just as much of a waste? It makes no fucking sense to me. And I'm not challenging anyone's beliefs. I'm not saying that theirs aren't valid and they aren't fact-based in their own way. Um, that's a scary, I was really hesitant about saying that, because I'm an engineer, I'm a scientist. So it's a fine line there. Um, but there's a lot to religion and there's a lot of value to it. I think it's brought probably more problems to the world than it has, solutions. Even right now, especially right now, it's kind of the culmination of all of those problems. Um, whatever crusade you're fighting, it's been going on forever. Um, I've been thanked for doing God's work when I was doing corporate work. And I've had people try to kill me because they felt that their God wants me dead, which is crazy. Because if you think about Islamic radicals, like the Mujahideen, for example, they're Muslims. They worship the God of Abraham. As a Christian, guess what? It's the same God. Even in the Quran, and I don't want to get on all this, but they do talk about Jesus being an amazing prophet. It's just so much in common, but so much different. So much conflict over ideals that aren't necessarily based in reality and only affect us as humans as much as we let them. And I got to a point where I applied that to my life. And most of this happened while I was in Iraq. I applied um, just what is, and I need to focus on that. That's the only thing I can even try to control. I can't control it. I can persuade it a little bit, maybe. The afterlife, some omnipotent, magnanimous being coming down and like judging me for the free will that they gave me in the first place. It doesn't click. It just doesn't click it doesn't jive with me. That said, I love Jesus. I do. I think he was an amazing human being who had a lot of really good things to say. I think his message was bastardized in a lot of ways, like every good person throughout history. I mean, that's just there's so many people who use like Martin. I mean, I've seen Martin Luther King. I'm not gonna go down there. I'm not gonna put either of us on a list right now. But I've seen a lot of people's faces next to a lot of people's faces, and it's like what, so yeah, I distance myself from especially organized religion. Um, I would call myself a spiritual person in a sense, that we are all powered by energy, and that energy is all one encompassing energy that belongs to the universe and is the universe. So yeah, we're all part of a big experience together. And whether there's any intelligent design or not, I'm not gonna say there is or isn't. I don't believe there is, and I can't prove there is, just like nobody can prove that it does exist. It's just it's what we believe in our faith. I think as long as we love each other and we're good people and we value that over everything else, then we're all on basically the same page. It's when people start believing they're more correct than the others. That's when it causes the conflict and strife we have today, even within families. I went years without talking to my dad because of religion and politics, and not even my politics. Politics he thought I had. That happens a lot now. A lot of my MAGA family, I'll talk to them and I'll disagree with something they say, and they go on this whole diatribe about how I'm this liberal, whatever, Democrat, and I'll say I'm not any of these things, and they'll say, "Well, you talk like them," and it's like I just disagreed with you. Disagreeing with you does not make me anything, it just makes me not you, and you are this small, fucking, insignificant fraction of the population on Earth. Like, what an arrogant way of looking at it. So, I'm not gonna say that I'm correct. I'm not gonna say that I'm incorrect. I'm not gonna push my beliefs on anybody. But yes, I am an atheist. Yes, I did lose my religion in the sense that I'm not a Southern Baptist anymore. I do love and respect a lot of different religions and their prophets or their God or whatever, person leads that religion. I have a lot of respect for them, and I see a lot of good done in their name. I also see a lot of bad done in their name. So
Yeah.
reality is what it is, and that's it. That's how I feel about it, and I hope I explained that.
Man, that was
Yeah.
great. I agree, and um, so one thing you'll find about me is I'm smart history wise, but when it comes to word choice, not a lot of knowledge there. I try really hard, um, but I connect on a lot of levels on a, almost everything that you said there. Dad's a Southern Baptist pastor. I have a great dad. Um, but going out on my own branch there, going to college, things changed for me. When I started to really look into things like you said, cracks, and you start digging. And as a historian, I dive into the history behind subject matter. And then some of the classes that, like I teach a class dedicated to Holocaust and genocide, understanding why it happened. Teaching that class for like the last 6 years really opened my eyes, like you point out, the value of human life, and how people really treat each other when humanity gets to its worst point there. But I thought it was funny when you bring up the the liberal comment t in teaching, and sometimes when you just teach like government concepts, or you teach like a spectrum, or how like the electoral college works, or you bring up this is what one side believes versus the other side. I remember I was teaching um the electoral college one time, and how it functions and its purpose. And a kid evidently went and told their parent what I was teaching, and I got a email that I was a liberal fascist, and I was
Yeah.
that really made me like I started showing all the people I work with.
The
Uh, because we're all
oxymoron.
of different political backgrounds. I was like, can y'all make any heads or tails of what this means? And it was so funny. That
Yeah.
that was like, man, that was about 8 years ago. I still have the email somewhere. It's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. Well,
But
you're a canine feline. You're I don't know. I mean, I can pull up all the spectrums and we can go over them.
well, we're talking on the concept of religion and the idea here. When you were deployed to Iraq, speaking of Islam and Muslims, you saw the worst of that, but I also assume you saw the best of that, but with
Oh yeah.
really good people. And I want to talk about some of that while we're here. While you think about your time in Iraq, with the good that you saw there of that Middle Eastern culture, what are some of the good memories or the good things that you saw come from those deployments, the people you interacted with, the conversations perhaps?
Yeah, so I mentioned before when we were talking about I met a lot of really good friends. I had some really great deep conversations with a lot of our interpreters. A big part of my job was monitoring media. So at nighttime, if I wasn't out on patrol or something, I would watch the news. I would watch Al Jazeera, BBC, Reuters. Actually, the networks I watch now, and I would watch them with an interpreter. But I would watch, the Al Jazeera that's airing in Jordan. I would watch the BBC airing in Syria. I would watch more relevant to Iraq and what was going on. And I made friends with a lot of those guys. I had great conversations with them. But I think a better answer to your question would be my experiences with just randoms. First and foremost, we always joked about how if we were sitting in bumfuck South Carolina and somebody banged on our door and you just open your door and there's a squad of Marines like, hey, we're coming in and searching your house. Like, no, the fuck you're not. Like, what do you think you're doing right now? And there would be a shotgun in their faces. Um, Not only did that not happen, but because of their religion, we would be. So this one time, I was talking about this in really, really one particular time that really stands out to me. We were on like this 12 to 15 hour patrol or something like that. And we had taken a bunch of fire, but nothing really happened. And this was hours later, probably like 8 or 9 hours into this patrol, and we needed to rest. So this guy in his backyard, we were walking up the Euphrates at the time. I'm pretty sure this was in Barwana, um, right on the Euphrates River, and along the Euphrates is palm groves. It's just palm trees, and it's not cool in there, but it's cooler than the desert, and it's really humid right along the river. So there's a lot. It's a lot. I don't want to say it's lush, but there's a lot of undergrowth. Anyway, we were in those palm groves, and this guy had his house with his backyard up against the Euphrates, and it was all palm grove in his backyard. It was really nice, and just really, I mean, it was very natural, unkempt, but clean. You know what I mean? He didn't take care of it at all, but it grew naturally, really just really beautiful and accommodating. So we just plopped out in his backyard. We just showed up, didn't knock on the door or anything. We just were walking and just stopped in his backyard. I remember I was sitting against the tree. I had sat down and I had all my gear on me and I'd leaned up against this tree and I had my rifle like this and I was trying to go to sleep and I heard and I looked up and there's the homeowner talking to our squad leader. And the homeowner, it was this really old guy, he had his long beard and wearing his getup, and he had this tray. I'll never forget this big metal tray. It was about 3 feet, 2.5 feet, 3 feet across, and it was just covered in fruits and vegetables. There was yogurt on there, cheese and bread. Like he had everything on this, and he came out and he fed it to all of us. And he was like, hey, I don't want to be rude, but when are you guys leaving? And we were like, oh, well, we'll be out of here really, really soon. And he was like, please, please do. In so many words, he did not want us there. But because their religion requires them to accommodate anyone in or at their home, he came out, he fed us, he welcomed us, he fed us, and then told us to just move along as soon as possible. That would not happen here, man. I'm saying, like, if all of these troops patrolling around here, I'm even saying for me, if they came in my fucking yard and just laid out like they were going to chill, you got something coming. Not only are the sprinklers getting turned on, but you're going to have this little fucking goofy ass white dude screaming at you like, get the fuck off my property. Like that's not happening. So I know that it wouldn't happen. A lot of people say, oh, well, I might let it happen. But if an occupational force is moving through your yard and they just chill and you don't know them, they're not your people, like fuck that. No one's going to be okay with it. So instances like that, there were a lot of them. They were always extremely hospitable, always extremely polite, very humble people. And all of that applied, it came directly from their religion and their upbringing. I was in Al Anbar, which anyone knows anything about the Middle East and knows about Iraq directly, Al Anbar is kind of like the Alabama of the Middle East. It's very, it's, there's this, it's very very rural. It's just a big desert, and there's a lot of Bedouins out, the guys with their camel walking out in the middle of nowhere. I used to trade shit with them all the time. We'd come across them. He'd have this like he'd pull out a handkerchief and open it, and there's a bunch of hobos, a little bread, the flat bread there, and I'd give him an MRE, and he'd give me two hobos, and then I'd give him some of my Camel cigarettes, and he'd give me some of his Iowa cigarettes or whatever, and we'd like send each other on our way. But they were always really polite. They always had manners and they were never angry per se. Now a lot of bad things happened when we were there, and there's a lot of collateral. I won't say a lot because I didn't see a lot of collateral damage, but I've read the reports and I've seen the videos and I've read books, and I know people get killed, civilians get killed. And when that happened, they would come to our base. So I remember I was on watch and hit no, not in Rutba. I was on gate guard in Rutba. And no one ever came through the gate except for our people. So we were just sitting there, and this guy, this Iraqi guy, just came walking up to us, and we were all just like, "What the fuck, man?" We said we did the whole Kifa Nanik kind of stop or I'll shoot. Asked him what he wanted, and he told us he was like, you killed my brother. Like I need to talk to someone. So we radioed it in. An officer came down and talked to him, and the guy, they're very, I don't know that this necessarily applies to the religion, but the Iraqi people were very agrarian. Um, and as a result, they're very this for that people. If something happens, they need to be compensated. If they lose something, like a part of their crop, they need to be compensated, etc. So they would come and, they weren't demanding money, they were demanding compensation. In America, we don't have compensation to just hand out, but we got money, so we would pay them. And I don't, again, the cost of death was 3 grand. That's the most I ever saw someone get paid was $3,000 for their loved one's life.
Jeez.
$3,000 doesn't sound like a lot to us. It is a lot for an Iraqi, but it wasn't that much. If I got killed in Iraq, my family would have got like 350K or something like that. It was a lot of money. Um, that was maybe the translation would be about $15,000 to them. I mean, it wasn't that much. It's not going to get them very far, but they would accept it and move on. I think, he probably translated it into how many animals can he buy with it? How much land can he get? How much fertilizer? How much can he give his family for it? So it was a very transactional experience meeting these people, and not in a bad way. I'm not putting them down at all, and I'm not saying that that's what life is necessarily. But it was accepted. It was an accepted way of life. So that was a big experience for me, and that was kind of the one of the better experiences from the people. Again, I don't know that that's directly related to their religion, but everything else I know about their customs and their etiquette would kind of align. So.
Well, in many ways, compared to how some people act in this country towards one another with religious beliefs, it's kind of shocking for some people that will hear this to understand how hospitable the Muslim culture was to this Christian culture that they're
Mhm.
encountering, and this occupying force. Now, building off of that, you think about 3 grand and the earlier conversation about religion and the value of human life, it really does put it in perspective of that's what it was being valued at the time. And that's how we view of, oh, here's 3 grand. What's to stop that from ever happening here if things ever get to a point of like, hey, here's X amount of money, we're sorry, that's all we can do, that's that, you know, move on. It's
We don't even get the, I'm sorry,
nope.
we don't get the money. They just change the subject, man. It's happening. It happens every day. Where's our Doge money? They saved us trillions of dollars. Where is it? Is it going into our roads? Is it going to our schools? Is it going to Medicare? Is it going to Social Security? Is it going to any of the fucking government programs that have been gutted? Did it go to NASA? Did it go to cancer research? What did it go to? They do it to us every day. And then some
Mhm.
sensationalism happens and we forget all about it. So, yeah, I think the value of human life was probably worth more in Iraq than it is here. I
Um,
mean,
And like first of all, I'm excited about the podcast already just for like these conversations that we're having and what that could bring, but realistically too, it's a honest point that people need to honestly reflect on. This is 20 years ago. So what does it mean now in 2025 if we're to go back to Iraq or Afghanistan or somehow we get involved officially boots on the ground in Israel or even Ukraine or even Venezuela, who knows? But what does that mean when this follows once again? I assume similar rules of engagement that applied in 2005 that are still being utilized now, similar customs. Who knows?
Well, I've read a lot about, yeah, they haven't really made any, as far as I know, they haven't made any changes that are set in stone, but they've talked about changing rules of engagement and pulling back from the Geneva Convention. So the rules from the Department of War may be changing soon, I mean, things
Well,
might be different.
for you, especially in 2005, what were the rules of engagement in 2005?
They varied. So off first and foremost, what country you were in. But basically, if we saw someone pointing a rifle at us, we were allowed to fire. In Haiti, they had to fire first because it was a humanitarian mission. I mean,
Right.
we can't just go around blasting every. I'm laughing, and that's really kind of not okay, but it would kind of we wouldn't win hearts and minds doing that. So. We had to have them fire at us first, and then we could return fire as long as we had a clear line of sight. The problem with Haiti is everything was sheet metal, so those our rounds would keep going. Whatever's behind them is not going to stop the round, and it could keep going. And there's crowds of people everywhere, so it was really risky. I understand we had heightened rules of engagement. One, it was crowded, and two, it was a humanitarian mission. Iraq, on the other hand, if they pointed a weapon at us, they were done. I mean, and that was well known on both sides. Like, it's not like they knew or they didn't know that if they pick up an AK-47 and point it at us, like that's stupid. Why would you do that? That said, if we saw them with an AK-47, that doesn't mean we can open up on them. Every military aged male, which is basically 18 and up, was allowed to have one AK-47 with one 30-round magazine per military age male in the household. So if there were three men that were 18 and up, they could have three AKs with three 30-round magazines. They could have those for a reason because according to Iraqi law, they could have them. And then they were also farmers. They were fighting off coyotes and all kinds of shit. So they needed a gun, and AKs were everywhere. Um, so yeah, my point is if you see a guy off in the distance with an AK, it could be a farmer. You don't want to just go in blasting. It's just not the best way to go and negotiate. So as far as anywhere else I went, it was always really strict. Every time you go into a new theater, they tell you what the rules of engagement are. They tell you the escalation of force is EOF and the ROEs. They tell you escalation of force, for example, if you're stopping traffic. So if I need to stop traffic in a road so my unit can cross it, we'll stop traffic about like half a click down so our unit can cross way back there so there's no chance they'll get attacked. Well, I'll go out in the middle of the road and I'll put my hand up. If they don't stop, then I put my rifle up. If they don't stop, I can put one across the bow basically. I can put one into their grill of their car. And if they don't stop, I just light them up. So that's the escalation of force. That's how we would rank that. So every situation, your ROE and your EOF are at the forefront of your mind. What do I do and when do I do it? It's not that any Marine needs to process that. We all do it instinctively. We all know it. It's drilled into our heads. So we know the ROEs, the EOFs before we go into the theater, and we know how to apply them and when to apply them. So yeah, Iraq was, it was kind of I don't want to call it the Wild West because that implies a lot of really iffy shit, but it was wild back then when I was there. The ROE and the EOF were always applied, but it was just so often. There was we were being fired at so often, and it was just crazy. We'd take mortars and we'd pinpoint where they came from, and we would go, and it was a mortar tube set up with a block of ice inside of it, and they would drop the mortar inside, and it would sit on the ice until it melted. Then it would hit the pin and fire off. Like by then, all those guys who set it up are miles away. they did shit like that constantly. We would get pop shots and never find a thing. It happened a lot, but I was lucky enough. I'll say I was lucky enough to never. I was never in a situation where EOF and ROEs weren't applied. You know, we always did the right thing in the situations I was in, and I'm sure most will attest to that.
Well, and building off of that final statement there, knowing what we do know now about the conflict in Iraq, or even stuff that came out, like for example, Haditha, and the unit that was involved there in the killing of numerous civilians, if I'm not mistaken, sometime 2005. I think elements of 3-1. I
Talking
could
about
be
in
wrong on
Haditha?
that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. That was in late November of '04, I think.
Okay.
It was right before I got there.
But that's for one, looking back and being able to say, that I was involved, a part of, or with units that did things by the book the right way, that
Yeah.
definitely, I assume, with all the stigma that can be associated around Iraq or even Afghanistan, makes knowing what you did and the little impact perhaps you have or big impact easier to deal with. I mean, I would assume it has to, being that I've never stood in those boots.
It does help a lot. You know, I think I would lose a lot of credibility if I denied all of that stuff. In my experience, you know, I never saw civilians lined up and shot. I never saw anyone raped. I never saw anyone assaulted in an unfair manner. I never saw any of it, but I always give the disclaimer that that doesn't mean it didn't happen,
Correct.
but I never saw it. Kevin McCall wasn't there when it happened. The disclaimer is what keeps my credibility because I think if I just denied it up and down, everyone would be like, this guy's full of shit. You know, the fact that I acknowledge it is the only reason anyone believes me. And I need people to believe me. I really do. Because one, from to save fucking face, like I'm not some murderer rapist. Like I didn't go out and kill babies or any of this crazy shit that I've been accused of over the last 20 years, man. I've been to parties, I've met people, I've drank with people in bars, man. I've had some weird shit thrown at me, like weird accusations. Really weird. Um, but more than that, just to kind of put it out in the open that, you know, it's easy to dehumanize people. But in order to dehumanize people, you have to dehumanize yourself first. And once you do that, it's really fucking scary. Don't dehumanize the military. We are your brothers and sisters. We're your parents in some cases. We're your kids. We have kids. Yeah, like we all get married and have kids. We get drunk and we get in trouble with the law and we get like, I mean, we get speeding tickets. You know, like we do all this shit. We're just people. Like they think we're just these robots. And I saw a video on Reddit right before we got on, and it was this these National Guardsmen walking through DC and some guy was following them playing the Empire's anthem from Star Wars. It was great. And one of the soldiers got all pissed off and turned around and threatened to call the cops on him. And that's weird. But you know, I'm making fun of those guys too. But we all have to remember that they are us, you know, and I don't want people just assuming that they're a bunch of murdering rapists just because they have a uniform on. That's a slippery slope.
Yes, it is.
You know, we're already sliding down that slope in too many ways. I don't want this to be one of them
Amen.
until it's necessary. Hopefully, we never get to that point.
Well, speaking of Reddit, I actually was going to pull up the photograph of you when I was asking about, your interactions, that was on your page of you with the slingshot and bring that up for a conversation
Yeah.
point. But for some reason, your Reddit page is unavailable for like your post and comments. So
Oh,
evidently
I'm
you,
still blocked. I mean,
yeah, I was about to say like, so clearly I was going to pull that up. But anyhow, that's something that
I'll upload them all.
we'll go through those photographs, but I thought that photograph just cracks me up in the story behind it. But I want to go back to the ROE real quick, because I don't know, have you ever watched the show Generation Kill?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Read the book.
I know that in that book and in the show, they talk about seeing guys with binoculars analyzing them or guys taking photographs of them at certain points, and then they go up the chain of command and figure out if they're possible. Like, was that part of the ROE as well? If you guys
So,
spotted it, so
those guys literally had different ROEs. They were fighting a uniformed force. I was not. They were fighting the Republican Guard. When they were fighting the Republican Guard, when you're fighting a uniformed military force, You have completely different ROE. I mean, they're a lot looser. So if I had been fighting people in uniform, okay, but we're fighting people who are wearing exactly what everyone else is wearing. And it's really racist what we call them, or xenophobic, whatever you want to call it. It's we call them man dresses, but it's they basically wear this full body robe that's a really thin material, and it breathes, and you don't really wear anything under it. And when everyone is wearing that, they're just some of them are white and some of them are light blue. That's the only fucking difference. They all look alike. They're all wearing the same fucking thing. So you need to apply different rules of engagement. You need to apply completely different escalation of force because, again, a farmer in Iraq with an AK-47 looks just like a guy who's in the Mujahideen in Iraq holding an AK-47. You know what I'm saying? Like it's from far away, you can't tell the two apart. So you need to be mindful. If I'm looking at someone who is obviously wearing the enemy army's, uniform, that's a combatant, period. They they're gone. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They would do the exact same thing to me. So
Well, going off a point that you make there of blending in with the civilians, the moves look exactly like everybody else. A friend of mine who was in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2003 and 2007, if I'm not mistaken, brought up a really good point when we were just chatting over beers one time. He said, in situations where you're in a heavy civilian presence, and he said, a firefight breaks out, or mistakes are made, and you kill the wrong people. He said, you might have killed seven, maybe eight moods. He said, but you created now 20 or maybe 25
yep.
because you have now made mistakes where the wrong people were killed, like civilians that were teetering with the aspect of joining the movement, or people that had no intentions of joining, but now that you've killed their brother, their father, their best friend, and they've seen it, that has given them the inspiration. And he said that was something that we could never, ever hope to fight against, knowing that that was always there.
Yeah, in guerrilla warfare, you can't, I mean, if you yourself are uniformed armed service, you're not going to fight guerrillas. You're never going to be able to do it. I mean, basically every war we've been in since, especially Vietnam. Well, I mean, it's not that we lost them, it's that we just didn't. There was no winning. Winning did not exist. It just wasn't a factor. There was no such thing as winning because as long as there are humans there, they're going to keep fighting. Now, as far as my fears with the Iraqi people, I won't say everyone that I fought wasn't Iraqi. I would say a good 85% of the people that I fought were not Iraqi. The Iraqi people, though, the fear I had of them was them aiding the Mujahideen. They would bring in some guy from Syria, and he would live in their house with them, and they would say, "This is our uncle from, two villages over," and they would protect him. And we had no idea. There's no census report for us to, verify this person's existence with, so we just believed them. That was the big fear for the Iraqi people. And I'll tell you, that I have a really gut-wrenching story about an experience with the family during the invasion of Haditha. I was telling you a little bit about it. I told you about the entry, but it was a good like 76-hour invasion. I mean, I was up for 3 days just fighting. And my experience with one family in particular was, we ended up taking their house for a little bit, and I was sitting with the grandmother, the wife, and the kids, and the father was trying to calm down the kids. And there was like an A-10, there was a warthog going on outside. Cobras were flying over. There were explosions, firefights going on outside. And just seeing what these poor people were going through, it was I don't know, it really tore me up. But I know I kind of went on another
Man,
subject
so
here.
well, to end out today, before we end on, like I said, always end on a positive question, but I'll go into that story though, that gut-wrenching story in Haditha of what is happening in that moment.
Well, so we had pushed into this house. We were taking sniper fire, and oh God, it's okay. It's a pretty long story. It's actually two families, but The first one, man, I don't know if I should. So okay. We were talking about accidents happen. So here's a perfect example of an accident that almost happened. It didn't happen, but it almost happened. And this is this kind of tears me up when I talk about it, and it's not really that bad or anything, but you'll understand why. So we had a primary. I was with I was embedded with a fire team because we were actually doing an invasion. And as I told you before, if it was a large scale, I wanted to be with a smaller unit, as small as I could because I was going to be with them. And I stuck with this one fire team pretty much through the entire invasion, and they had a small gunner with them. We had an assaultman with us, and he had a small. So we had three targets. There was a primary, secondary, and a tertiary target for the small rocket that
Super
we were.
fast question, super fast. What unit is this so we can get specifics?
This was 3-2. Shit, man, it's been so long. This was not 3-2. This was 3-2. This was 3-2. Definitely 3-2.
Okay.
So we were pushing up. We pushed in and we broke off from our squad, and we had three targets. There were three houses that we were supposed to hit, and we were told that they were making IEDs within the house. So we went to the first one. It was already gone. It was already leveled. So we went to our secondary target. And just as we were about to like bang bang, uh, we started taking sniper fire. So we scattered. I mean, we didn't scatter. We took cover and did exactly what we were supposed to do. We regressed and we pushed into a house. The house that we pushed into was our tertiary target. We weren't, if we hadn't blown up the house we were about to blow up, we would have blown this house up. And we didn't have any other choice but to push back into it. So we pushed back into it, kicked the door down, and we went in and started searching. And there was a man and his two little girls. And they were probably, I mean, one of them was probably 4 and the other one was probably 7. And there was no ID making materials in there. There were no weapons in there. It was bad intel. I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't part of the planning. I don't know how it came down. I just know that that was our third target. And we called in support, air support for the sniper. We gave them coordinates and we were told to stand by. So we were just chilling in that house for a good like 30 to 45 minutes before we pushed out again. And just like the other story I was telling you a moment ago, which I'll tell you again later, there were like A-10s going over, Cobras going over, CH-46s, 53s, helicopters, planes, you name it, just flying overhead. There were explosions outside, gunfire that sounded like it was 200 feet out the front door. Um, it was terrible. And this dad, and his little daughters, they had been woken up by all of it. They didn't know what was going on, and the little girls were pretty scared. But the dad was running them through their morning routine. And we were all sitting there just listening. Like none of us said a word. We were just sitting there like, holy shit, we almost blew this fucking house up, you know? Looking at each other, like knowing that this almost happened. And I remember hearing, we had an interpreter with us too. And I remember hearing the little girls singing, and I asked the interpreter what they were singing, and he said that they were singing their wake up song. And they were like, I wake up and I rub my eyes and then I brush my hair and then I brush my teeth. And it was just the sweetest little song that these little tiny girls were singing. And man, it destroyed me. It, I don't know. Again, I don't know how bad intel works. I don't know if it was like from a bad informant or if we just, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what was in the initial target. And it made me think, what's in the secondary target? What's in every other fucking target, you know? And that's the problem. That's when you know you're messing up as a Marine because you're not supposed to think about that stuff in the moment, you know? And you can't. You just got to keep moving. And I put that in my pocket and I think about that a lot. I think about those little girls singing their wake up song. I think about the other house where I was with snipers at this point. Our unit was taking sniper fire and we were taking position on top of this house. So the sniper team, along with me, took this house. The three guys went upstairs, two guys stayed down with me, and we monitored the family. One guy was at the front door, and I remember it was two older gentlemen, like a grandfather and a father. There was grandmother, a mother, two girls and two boys, I'm pretty sure it was. And I remember thinking as the cobras went over my head, like they sounded like they were 100 feet off the ground, every time they did, the kids would scream, like the mother and the grandmother would kind of whimper. They were scared shitless, and I didn't know how to tell them that, hey, with me right now is the safest place you can be in this place. Like I didn't know how to tell them, like, hey, everything's gonna be okay. Don't worry about it. I didn't know how to tell them anything that wouldn't be a lie. Like I didn't know how to cope with seeing a family of people all cowering in fear and knowing that I'm part of the reason. I didn't know how to deal with that. I still don't know how to deal with that. I don't think anyone should know how to deal with that. That's the part of the haunting that needs to remain, I guess. But I'll never forget that palpable fear. I could taste it, and I could hear it within them. I remember thinking this would be a really cool situation if it weren't for these people just being completely and totally terrified. I'm sitting in this house. It's like playing Call of Duty. You remember Modern Warfare where you're running through the desert and you're running through buildings and you're fighting the bad guys, except for there's people fucking everywhere. There's like civilians and kids and like everywhere. Every building has people in it. We asked them to evacuate before we invade, but they don't have anywhere to go. Like where would they go? So I don't know, man. I don't even remember. I do remember, but I'm sorry I went on all this, and it's really emotional. It's really hard to talk about that kind of stuff, and it's really hard to think about it because everyone would think like the combat is the stuff that sticks with you. And maybe for a lot of people it is, but this is the shit that sticks with me. It's the human emotion, the hopelessness that I saw in people's faces. The once you've seen someone beg for their life, once you've seen kids beg for their life, like like I was saying that life is pretty not very valuable. Death isn't very valuable. My death wouldn't have been very valuable in that moment. It's just to my family it would have been, but to the world and the existence and everything that I was doing to those little kids, it wouldn't have been. So that's the gut-wrenching shit for me. It's thinking back to all of these times where I had to come to terms with being a person with empathy. I don't think that empathy is evil. I don't think it's a waste. I think it's what makes us human. And focusing on that empathy is really the only thing that brings me any pain about what I did in Iraq. I didn't agree with the war, but I did the best in the situation I was in. I joined not knowing what was actually going on. I thought I did. I was just young, and I think that a lot of people are taken advantage of by like that. But if you have an ounce of humanity, war is not the place for you. It just isn't. What's unfortunate is it's fought mostly by people with humanity, and that's the terrible thing is those people with humanity bring that shit back with us, and we have to introduce the rest of the world to it, and it shouldn't be like that. No one should have to see that crap, and no one should have to experience it.
Well, to go off of that, Scout saying hello to everybody in the background. Um, to go off of that, I'm proud of you for trusting me and opening up to talk about what is hard for you to talk about when it comes to the interactions in that moment. That says a lot for you as an individual. But it's also important. People need to understand that this is the reality. I was telling my kids earlier this week when we were talking about war with the Romans. I'm like, you guys have only seen war. I've only seen war through either photographs, videos, video games, or movies. I said, I've never been there. And I said, I can try my best to understand, but I never will. But I said, take it from me, from the people I've talked to, what it does. And I said, it's not always just the combat that's bad. I said, it's other things that you see that stick with you. That's a prime example that I'll use in my teachings. But also, to build off of that, Kevin, I mean, you raised a great point that where are these people supposed to go to? I know that for the invasions and like for, Fallujah is a great example for anybody that studied the Marine Corps in Fallujah. People are encouraged to leave. Where do you go to? Where is there to go? And on top of that, if you do leave, there's no guarantee that when you come back, like, are your belongings going to be there? Is your home going to be there? A lot of
Yep.
people stayed kind of like hurricane wise to make sure their shit doesn't get messed with. And then that also complicates the matter there of when you're fighting in a block of houses, because I've talked to some Fallujah veterans. They said, you'd go in some houses for a couple of blocks and it's nothing but people. And then the next one, it's filled with Mooj fighters. And then you've got to worry about the fact of, if you're going through some of these rooms, what if there's civilians in the basement because the Mooj have taken over their house and you go down there to frag that? And then they said, luckily that did not happen to them, but they know people that did. And they said that stays with them because
Yep.
that's not what you're there for. And that's your direct cause of your action. It's like, you know, a lot of those guys that had situations like that that came back, they're not here anymore.
How you know we've lost civility, man? We fought so many wars, uniformed forces versus uniformed forces for so long as civilized people, so that it didn't overflow into the civilian world. But here we are, I mean, who we are fighting is civilians. They are civilians. I mean, they're combatants, but that doesn't make them not civilians. They're not fighting for anything other than their own beliefs, it's scary, and that's scary, man. They don't have ROE, they don't have EOF, they don't have anything. It's really it's terrifying that we frivolously piss these types of people off every day.
That's an excellent point to bring up and have been doing so, like you said, in a scary sense, but in a dark humor sense since Vietnam.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, will this next generation be a part of this bigger era since 1965, or will this generation perhaps have a different conflict? I don't know. But to end on a humorous note, for today, as always, I want to go back to our good friend Wagner. Um, and I want you to reflect, if you can, when is the first time you ever encountered Wagner loves cock?
Man, I'm gonna have to say it was probably at Lejeune, 2003, 2004, on the MEFX in a Porta John. So man, I can't remember the names of the roads, but if you go into the main gate of Camp Lejeune, you go all the way to the back. There's that little road that circle, and you take a right. There was like if you go all the way to the end, there was the FSSG building. I remember that huge white building, and you can take a right there at the traffic circle. And right down there on the left, there's this massive field, and that's where we did the MEFX. And they had brought porta johns out for us, so we didn't have to dig slit trenches anymore, because apparently digging those all over the base was a bad idea. So we had everything set up, and I went out in one of those porta johns, and there it was, man. First and foremost, I saw one of the most poorly drawn wieners I've ever seen in my life. The pubes weren't even attached to it. There were hairs on the balls that were longer than the hairs at the top. It didn't make any sense. Who does that? You don't want a beard. So I saw that. I fixed it with my own marker, obviously. I mean, I did my job, my
What
duty as a
self-respecting individual is not going to fix that?
obviously the asshole that did it in the first place, but I'll fix it. I got you. I should have got an AM for that, but whatever. And underneath it was definitely Wagner loves cock. And I remember thinking, who is Wagner? And I went out and I asked a couple people, I was like, do you know someone named Wagner?
You got anything? Okay, hold on. Let me fix my headset. What is going on here? I've lost sound. Everything went out. You know what? We're gonna solve this problem real quick. Let's do. Stevie, speak for me. Oh, it's on you. I can't hear you. Yeah, I've lost all comms with you. I have zero. What the hell? All right. Um, speaker. All right, try that now. Oh, shoot. Man, that's the mic. Brother, I have no idea right now. Now you're, let's see. No, what the dog? Damn it, man. Why? Why technology? Why? Shit. Anything? Wagner is haunting us, that bastard. I am pissed. I am so mad. Um, yeah, we'll pick up with Wagner whenever we do this again, and I need to make sure it's not my system messing up. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the damn recording. But before I do that, Kevin, because I'll put this back in there, even though I can't hear a damn word you're gonna say. Um, Sincerely, man, thank you for doing this, being vulnerable, especially for today. Showing a side that not a lot of your generation is ready to do, or our generation is ready to do with our global war on terror veterans. So, man, you're making leaps and bounds, and I hope that, whether we know it or not, that this is inspiring someone who went through what you did to start doing this. And that's my hope and drive through this is, hopefully this helps people out there. But as always, my man. Thank you for your service and welcome home, dog. All right. I know you can't hear me. I will text you. But tomorrow, Tuesday, whatever works best for you or whatever you're free this week, man, we'll pick up the shenanigans and I'm gonna go shoot Wagner and my Zoom itch. So, peace, dog.